Let's talk about some sci-fi trilogies. Specifically, some sci-fi trilogies I have been dying to finish. So I am here to talk about 9 of those series today, and hopefully you can hold me to it. Okay guys, so May is traditionally the Finish the Series Challenge month, where I essentially use this as an excuse to finish some of the series that I am right in the middle of. However, this year's a little bit different since I am expecting a baby. So that being said, I don't have time to do a whole month of just finishing my series. However, I do want to talk about some sci-fi trilogies, specifically those trilogies that I am dying to finish. So I have 9 of them here that I want you guys to hold me to. I'm hoping that in the middle of the night, between all the waking up and diaper changes, I might be able to get done with these 9 books by the end of the year. So, it probably goes without saying, but a trilogy is a series of 3 novels. That means that if the author went back later and added a 4th book in the series, nope, it's not going to count. I'm looking at you, Jeff Vandermeer. You know, recently he added the Absolution book to his Annihilation series, and so that's not going to count. We also have traditional series like Isaac Asimov's Foundation, where he went back and added quite a few books, so those are not going to count. We also want to say that it's got to be novels, which means that if the author added in a random novella, the novella isn't going to count against it, but it's not going to count for it either. So novellas don't count. Lastly, we have to have some kind of consistency for this to count as a full trilogy series. So I'm looking specifically at Vernor Vinge's Fire Upon the Deep and Deepness in the Sky. Let's be real, just because of the mention of a single character does not make this a trilogy. You know what I'm saying? So I realize that might be a little bit of a subjective opinion, but you're just going to have to go with me here. So these 9 series are the ones that I want to get to. Lastly, I don't want to just make this a list of 9. Instead, I want to add one more element that might make it exciting for you to check out that I did in my Sci-Fi Duologies video. Definitely check that out in the description box and in the cards. And that is, I took the number of people who did Goodreads reviews for the first book and the number of people who did Goodreads reviews for the 3rd book and made a percentage out of them to figure out how many people are actually going on and finishing the series. Now I have multiple sci-fi trilogy videos coming at you shortly, so I averaged all of these numbers together and I came up with an average number of 21% of people who leave a review for the first book will leave a review for the second. This kind of checks out to me, as it's about 1 in every 5 people actually finish the series. I'm sometimes one of those people who doesn't finish them. So I will be giving you the percentage of the number of people so you can see if more people are reading through, maybe showing you a little bit more about how addictive this series is versus maybe a little bit more about how people were unhappy with the series. I also want to mention that some of the series with low numbers might also be because the 3rd book just came out. So let's get into these 9 books. All right, the first of the 9 is going to be, in no particular order, The Centennial Cycle by Malka Older. Book 1 is Infomocracy, and then we have Null States, and finally State Tectonics. This has an average rate of 19% finishing. This series is a very ambitious political series that proposes a new form of government, saying that every 100,000 people is a sentinel, and that sentinel gets to vote in a very public election every so many years, and whatever the majority votes for is what the government becomes. Obviously, the more number of sentinels each type of government has will give it more and more power over the world. And so, of course, we start this series with a bunch of characters who are involved in politics in various ways. We have one who is doing a lot of campaigning. We have another one who is a government agent slash spy. And finally, we also have a third perspective in this one that deals with the truth, kind of like the internet, that makes it public knowledge for everyone, and yet nobody is looking at it. There is all kinds of really interesting political statements being made subtly throughout this series, and I have finished both book 1 and book 2, and I just haven't gotten to book 3, even though book 3 is over there on my shelf. So I hope to do better with this series, and I have to say, for those of you who are afraid of politics, don't be. This one is full of a lot of fast-paced scenes, lots of action-packed things, and while there are some undercurrents of maybe some political statements that the author is making, you don't have to pick up on all of these to really enjoy the series. The next one on the list is going to be the Metro 2033 series by Dmitry Glukovsky. This trilogy involves Metro 2033, followed by Metro 2034, and then finally Metro 2035. This series has a 22% finish rate. Now, this is a very originally titled series, as you can tell, and it's a post-apocalyptic one. And it really follows the remnants of humanity that are trapped in the Moscow subway when the nuclear event went off. And society is really kept in these little tiny isolated areas at each station. And we get to see how each community has coped in some kind of extreme way. Some with religion, some with government, some with anarchy, and all kinds of those in between. We're following in the first book a man named Artyom who is tasked with a message that he must deliver on the other side of the subway. And so he has to make his way through all of these little individual stations of humanity to get to the other side of the station. And we get to really explore sociology in this one and how humans tend to grab onto something in particular to survive. This was a generally interesting psychology look, but it's really also about the atmosphere and how dark and creepy even something like darkness and silence can be. Now, the rest of the series follows other characters in the series and can be equally as Russian bleak style as the first one. Although I still have to say, while I finished the first and the first one is still my favorite. But I have to finish the series and pick up the third one, which I haven't gotten a copy of just yet. So here's hoping. Then an oldie but a goodie is going to be the Deathworld Trilogy by Harry Harrison, also very aptly named Deathworld 1, 2, and 3, for a whopping 25% finish rate. Now, this is an older series that is built around this extreme idea of survival. And we have an alien planet that is hostile to humans. And as humans continue to colonize this world, it gets more and more hostile. And we follow a main character named Jason, who is a professional gambler and con artist who challenges some of the assumptions and perspectives of how the people are running the colony and how they're interacting with this world. And he may be the only chance to change the quality of life for the people in that colony. Now, the subsequent books that the author decided to add on after the success of the first one, but this trilogy comes as an omnibus edition, which I happen to have, and really expands the scope in the other two books, dealing with how different cultures deal differently with extreme situations, and also trying to answer the unanswerable question, what does civilization really look like when the rules no longer matter? I can't wait to pick up the second and third of this one, even though I also own this one in the omnibus edition, but I've never made it past the first. Maybe because it is such a great standalone by itself, but it is a goal of mine to finish it out. Next, we have a series that everyone has heard of, and that's going to be the Silo Trilogy by Hugh Howey. Book 1 is Wool, Book 2 is Shift, and Book 3 is Dust. This has a whopping 50% finish rate, maybe because it also is a very successful TV show. This series begins in a deep underground dystopian society where we have rigid hierarchies and scarce resources and, of course, a fear of the outside. Now, this plot continues to amble along, and as we get to know more and more of this dystopian society's secrets, it also becomes a post-apocalyptic story and gets bigger and bigger. The second book is supposed to deal with how humanity got to that silo-style society. And then the third book goes back to the main story and finishes out exactly what the silo society is going to be. And I've only finished the first one of this series. I have to say it was a little bit difficult to read initially because it was published as a series of novellas, and then the author kind of smashed it all together to make a single novel. And I think if you got one of the early copies of this book, you can really see how it wasn't very smooth. And I think the series did a really good job of smoothing out some of those really rough edges. But I can't wait to get to the book number 2, which was actually published as a full novel. And then, of course, I have to finish it with book number 3. But I will be watching the series as well. And our next one on this list is going to be the Gaea Trilogy by John Varley. Book 1 is Titan, followed by Wizard, and then Demon. This trilogy has a 41% finish rate. Very impressive. This one initially starts as a big dumb object style story with a team that's going to investigate an object near Saturn, and sort of rapidly becomes something that science fiction hasn't seen before. Specifically as we're exploring things like fantastical creatures and broken laws of physics, we also get a lot of just things that we aren't expecting. This book almost becomes a sci-fantasy, almost like going with Alice into her Wonderland. However, it all begins to make sense towards the end, and it's supposed to have later books going into control, identity, and even the nature of intelligence itself. So it has lots of sci-fi themes, but lots and lots of fantasy-esque style descriptions. This one, you have to be ready to go down the rabbit hole in. And I can't wait, because I own all the books in this series, even though I've only finished the first one. I also have to add that John Varley's humor is not for everyone, but it is definitely for me. So we'll see what I think at the end of this series. The next one is one that I'm hoping will become a lot more popular, the Jean Le Flambeur Trilogy by Hanu. This trilogy starts with Quantum Thief, moves on to Fractal Prince, and finishes with Causal Angel. This series has a 24% finish rate, and I'm hoping to bump that up to 25% with my finishing of this series. So this one is a hard virtual reality sci-fi that follows the legendary thief Jean Le Flambeur, who is trapped in both a virtual, psychological, and physical jail, I should say. And he is rescued by several people who have decided that they are only willing to rescue him if he's willing to do another job for them. And of course, they're very vague on what exactly that job entails. This entire series follows Jean Le Flambeur as he is going through multiple cons and layered missions and all kinds of investigations, trying to figure out his own identity and his own memories, as well as trying to complete the one that is set in front of him. This one is supposed to be really fun, and I have to say it's a sometimes very dense read that is unlike anything else I have read in science fiction. I really think it is a really fantastic successor to something like Neuromancer, so if that's something that is up your alley, This book is not quite cyberpunk, but definitely scratches that itch in a new way. Next on the list is the MaddAddam Trilogy by Margaret Atwood. This one starts with Orcs and Crake, goes to Year of the Flood, and finally finishes with MaddAddam itself. This series has a 29% finish rate, and it definitely follows the decline of human society with an emphasis on genetic engineering and biotech and manipulation and corporate corruption and a future that is without any ethics, let's say. This one really sees a lot of individuals paying for consequences that big corporations are making, even generations past, and we really get to see the darkness of humanity in this series. And we follow a particular character in this one that gets to kind of witness all of the important events of the fall of humanity and what that looks like and where we went wrong. And this one is really uncomfortable in lots and lots of different ways. As a matter of fact, it's so uncomfortable that I only read the first book and then I had to take a break. Although I do plan to pick up the second and the third because I do think that she brings up a lot of really interesting pieces about humanity and makes me wonder if humanity really should be saved. Next on the list is going to be the Luna Trilogy by Ian MacDonald. This one starts with Luna New Moon, moves on to Wolf Moon, and finally Moon Rising with a whopping 29% finish rate, just like MaddAddam. This one takes place on a near future in a permanent moon colony that is governed by 5 ruling families that are all industrially in charge of something that is required for life on the moon. And we're following one particular family that's going through a particularly vulnerable stage in their development, and that is the passing on or the passing of the torch from one leader who is retiring to the next one. And of course, all of their rivals are ready to pounce. And lots of corruption and betrayal. There's lots of inter-family politics as well as external family politics. And this story just gets bigger and bigger and bigger with subsequent stories. I have to say, I really enjoyed the underdog story and the origin story of this family in book number 1. And I have decided that I want to go on and finish the rest of the series. This one has often been called a little bit more of a dry Game of Thrones with science fiction, and I would say that's a pretty accurate description. Last, but certainly not least on this list is the new Croubazan, also known as Boss Log Trilogy by China Mieville. This one starts with Perdido Street Station, moves on to the Scar, and then finally we have Iron Council. This one has a 22% finish rate, and this one just really is an interesting series that I'm not quite sure how to define. Is it fantasy? Is it science fiction? Nobody really knows. This series isn't quite the perfect trilogy because it involves different characters and different corners of this big industrial city known as New Croubazan. So the characters from book 1 may or may not actually appear in book 2, but we follow different aspects of the city and the underground and what's going on in this industrialized city. Especially for a city that is populated not just by humans, but also hybrid animal species, as well as remade criminals whose bodies have been very grotesquely changed as part of their punishment. This one has often been called weird science fiction and is also something that I would call grotesquely creative. There's something about it that makes it to where you can't look away. And it is, as I promised in other ones, something that is very unique and you won't be able to find anywhere else. I loved the first book. It was so creative and so interesting. I cared about the characters, and who would have thought that? And I was grossed out at the same time. I cannot wait to pick up the second book, The Scar, this year. And I'm hoping, if things go according to plan, I can also get to the third and final book this year. And that does it for my science fiction trilogies that I am dying to finish. Let me know of the trilogies that you are dying to finish for this year. Feel free to check out my other trilogies videos, which I will link for you in the description box down below, as well as my sci-fi duologies. And until next time, you guys, I will see you in the next video.